So for my book talk, I decided to do Cry the Beloved Country by Alan Paton. And for the summary, it's a priest named Kamalo who lives in a village in East South Africa. He is African. And he gets a letter from another priest who's in a city called Johannesburg. And he says that his sister Gertrude is sick. So he decides to go on a long journey to get his sister Gertrude. And while he's on the journey, he decides that he wants to look for his son who ran away from the village and never returned. So he gets there, he meets Gertrude and the priest, and Gertrude has become a prostitute and an alcohol seller. So he decides that he's going to heal her through God back at the village, so he's going to take her back. But he still wants to find his son, so he asks the priest if the priest will help him find his son. They ask around town. They run into Kamalo's brother, John, who's become very successful. He's a politician. He's a businessman. And he says that Absalom was there, but he left about a month ago. So they start to leave out of the city to look for him. And as they're leaving, Kamalo realizes that the reason their country's become such a dark place and such an unsafe place is the racial divide, the inequality, the injustice. It's just starting to become overrun by white Europeans, and it's tearing their country apart. The tribal feeling isn't there anymore. So it is hard for their journey because they are African and not white. So they make it out to the shanty towns outside of the city where all of the other Africans live. And they meet this girl that Absalom, his son, got pregnant and left. So she says that he went to the reformatory and he wasn't, but they went and checked and he wasn't there. So Kamalo asks the girl if she would like to come back to the village so he can raise his grandson and everything. She said yes. And then they find out that the police are looking for Absalom and Kamalo's brother John, his son Matthew, for the murder of a white man named Arthur Jarvis. And they end up finding Absalom and Matthew, and they arrest them. And there were other white men that committed the crime with them, but they got off. Absalom gets a sentence. I don't want to spoil what sentence it is. And Matthew also gets a sentence, which is less worse than Absalom's. So Kamalo says his goodbyes to his son because his son's in jail now. And he takes the girl back to Johannesburg to find Gertrude. Gertrude isn't there. She ran away. So he was just whatever, we're not going to find her. So then he says goodbye to the priest and he heads back to the village. Well, on his way back to the village, he runs into Arthur Jarvis, the man who got murdered, his father, James Jarvis, and his wife. James Jarvis was very nice. Kamalo expressed his apologies and his sympathy, and they were good. And then James Jarvis learns of the village that Kamalo lives in, and he felt so horrible because they are so, they are just so underprivileged, they have nothing. So he decides, since he's a rich white man, to help them. He donates milk, money, he makes plans to build a dam, get better farming equipment, and they become very close friends. James Jarvis's grandson becomes very close with Kamalo, and they just kind of create a big village, a big clan that really works well together of Africans and white people. So yeah, and I don't want to spoil the rest, but I really liked this book. I really did, because it is kind of a different read, if that makes sense. The way they use, it is in English, but the way they use, the way they speak in the book is so different than the way we speak today. So it was kind of a struggle. I had to take my time reading it to understand it. And they have a lot of African words in there that you get to, they have the definitions in the back of the book. So it also, to me, shows what it's like to live, it kind of shows what it's like today. Things have definitely changed, but talks about the racial inequality, and the injustice, and I think that's still going on today. And so the themes are reconciliation between fathers and sons, because James Jarvis and Arthur Jarvis, even though Arthur Jarvis was dead, he finally knew where his son was. Kamalo and Absalom, even though Absalom was going to jail now, at least he found his son and knows he's safe. Then it's the vicious cycle of inequality and justice, because on their journey, Kamalo was denied a lot of rides and a lot of rights because of the color of his skin. And his son got a bad sentence because he was an African and not a white man, because all the other white people who committed the crime got off. And then the last one is Christianity and faith, because no matter how much hardship Kumalo went through on this journey, his faith was never broken. His soul might have been shattered after he found his son and found out what he's done, but his faith was never broken in God. He knew that God would always be there for him. So yeah, I highly suggest this book.